My husband strutted into the VIP lounge of Helios International Hospital, holding hands with a model who was 7 months pregnant with his karma. He thought I was thousands of miles away in Europe, but I was waiting right at the end of the hall, holding the power to destroy him. When our eyes locked, he did not just see his wife. He saw the death sentence for the fake life he had built. My name is Lydia Mercer. For 15 years, I had been the silent architect behind my husband's success. But today, I was the demolition expert. I stood behind the frosted glass of the main clinic doors, watching the security feed on my tablet with the cold detachment of a surgeon preparing to cut. Grant Mercer steered his metallic silver Bentley into the exclusive VIP drop-off zone of Helios International Hospital. He stepped out of the driver's seat with the unearned confidence of a man who believed the world revolved around his schedule. He walked around to the passenger side and opened the door for her. Tiffany. She emerged, draped in a designer maternity dress that cost more than most people earned in 3 months. She was heavily pregnant, roughly 7 months along with the evidence of his betrayal. Grant was radiating arrogance. He believed I was currently sitting in a business lounge in Paris, sipping espresso and waiting for a connecting flight to Berlin. He had meticulously arranged a fake itinerary for me, a decoy schedule designed to give him the freedom to play house with his mistress. He thought he was a genius strategist. He did not know that every email he sent, every flight he booked, and every lie he told had been monitored by me. He thought he was the king of the castle, but he was just a jester dancing in my court. The VIP wing of Helios was my creation. I designed it to feel less like a clinical facility and more like a 5-star hotel. The walls were adorned with original abstract art, and the air was scented with white tea and thyme to mask the smell of antiseptic. Grant marched through the automatic doors, guiding Tiffany by the small of her back. He approached the reception desk where the head nurse, a sweet woman named Clara, was organizing files. "We have an appointment," Grant barked, checking his gold watch ostentatiously. "Dr. Evans." "Now." Clara hesitated, glancing down at her screen with a nervous flutter. "Mr. Mercer." "Dr. Evans is currently indisposed. If you could just take a seat, I do not wait," Grant snapped, his voice echoing off the high ceilings and causing 2 other patients to look up. "Do you have any idea how much money I bring into this place? I want service." "Not excuses. Get Evans out here or you will be looking for a new job by noon." I put my tablet away. It was time. I adjusted the stethoscope around my neck, a prop for the theater I was about to perform. I signaled the security team to hold their positions. I wanted to do this myself. I pushed the heavy double doors open. "I am afraid Dr. Evans has been relieved of his duties for the afternoon," I announced, my voice cutting through the tension like a scalpel. Grant spun around, annoyance written all over his face, ready to tear into another subordinate, but the words died on his lips. His eyes widened until I thought they might pop out of his skull. The blood drained from his face instantly, leaving him with a complexion that matched the gray walls. It was a visceral reaction, the body rejecting reality. "L." "Lydia," he choked out. The name sounded like a strangulation. "You. But you. The flight. Paris." He stumbled back as if physical force had hit him. His knees buckled, and he grabbed onto a stainless steel medical cart to keep from collapsing. The metal tray clattered loudly, the instruments rattling in time with his shaking hands. He looked like he was about to faint right there on the polished marble. Tiffany, however, was completely oblivious. She looked at me with a mix of boredom and irritation, seeing only a woman in a white coat, not the wife of the man holding her hand. "About time someone showed up," Tiffany complained, rolling her eyes. "He nearly fainted from the heat in here. We need water, and we need the doctor. My feet are swelling. Grant, tell her who you are." I ignored her completely. I walked straight toward Grant, the click of my heels sounding like nails in a coffin. I stopped inches from him. He was trembling. I could smell the expensive cologne I had bought him for Christmas, now mixed with the sour scent of fear. I reached out slowly. He flinched, his eyes darting to the exits as if looking for an escape route. I smiled, a cold, humorless expression that did not reach my eyes. I took hold of his crooked tie and tightened it just slightly. "You look terrible, darling," I said softly, my voice dripping with false concern. "Your pulse is visible from here. We really should check your heart health. Secrets can put such a strain on the cardiovascular system. Lydia, please." He could not form a sentence. He was hyperventilating, his chest heaving. "Oh, do not worry about Dr. Evans," I said, stepping back and turning to the doors I had just exited. I brought a second opinion, on my cue. The doors swung open again. 6 men and women in dark suits filed out. They were not doctors. They were the board of directors and the senior legal counsel of the hospital. They stood behind me in a phalanx, their faces grim and unyielding. This was not a medical consultation. It was a surprise audit of the CEO's conduct, and Grant had just walked his mistress right into the boardroom. Grant looked at the board, then at me, and finally at Tiffany. The realization hit him with the force of a freight train. He had not just been caught cheating. He had walked his mistress into the lion's den, and the trap had snapped shut the moment he stepped into the lobby. Watching Grant hyperventilate in the hallway triggered a memory from 15 years ago, sharp and stinging like a paper cut. Back then, the dynamic between us had been vastly different. I was the medical prodigy, a 23-year-old genius who could map the electrical pathways of the human heart blindfolded, but could not hold a conversation at a cocktail party without sweating. Grant was a pharmaceutical sales representative. He was charming, handsome, and utterly hollow. He had a smile that could sell ice to polar bears, but he struggled to understand the basic chemistry of the drugs he was peddling. I was the one who developed the patent for the pulse, the revolutionary cardiac monitoring algorithm that transformed Helios from a failing clinic into a billion-dollar healthcare empire. But I was young, female, and introverted. The investors wanted a shark, not a scientist. So, out of a blinding, naive love, I pushed Grant forward. I let him sign his name on the incorporation papers as CEO. I stepped into the shadows, content to be the supportive wife and the anonymous technical advisor, while he soaked up the applause, the magazine covers, and the admiration. It was a slow poison. Over the years, Grant stopped asking for my advice. He stopped saying thank you. He began to believe his own mythology. He convinced himself that the success of Helios was due to his handshakes and golf games, not my intellectual property. He started taking longer business trips. The expenses for client entertainment ballooned. Then came the smell of perfume that was not mine. And finally, Tiffany. I shook off the memory and walked briskly to the private elevator, leaving the chaos of the lobby behind. Once inside my office on the top floor, I locked the door and activated the wall of monitors. This was the nerve center of the hospital, a room Grant did not even know existed. I had eyes everywhere. On screen 4, I saw Grant trying to salvage the disaster in the waiting room. He was guiding a confused and angry Tiffany toward a seating area, his hands moving frantically. I turned up the volume on the surveillance feed. "Who the hell was that? Grant?" Tiffany screeched, fanning herself with a brochure. "Why did she touch your tie? She acted like she owned you." Grant wiped sweat from his forehead with a trembling hand. "She is nobody, babe. She is just a senior staff member, a legacy hire. She is mentally unstable, very jealous of my success. Do not listen to a word she says." "She said she was the chairman," Tiffany snapped. "She is delusional," Grant lied, his voice cracking. "I am the CEO. I run this place. Look, just sit here. I need to make a call." I watched as Grant stepped away, turning his back to his pregnant mistress. He pulled out his phone. his thumbs flying across the screen with desperate speed. He was not calling a doctor. I tapped a few keys on my keyboard and mirrored his phone screen onto my monitor. He was texting his personal lawyer. Change of plans. File the divorce papers now. She is here. She knows. Move the assets. Hurry. I leaned back in my leather chair, a cold smile touching my lips. He actually thought he could outrun me. He thought he could scramble to hide the money now, but he was years too late. I opened the thick leather binder resting on my mahogany desk. It was heavy with the weight of his sins. The first few pages were standard evidence of adultery, grainy photos of him and Tiffany at resorts in the Maldives, receipts for jewelry, and the lease on her apartment. But the real ammunition was in the second half of the file. Grant had gotten greedy. He was not just spending his salary, he was bleeding the hospital dry. The financial reports in front of me showed millions of dollars siphoned off through shell companies disguised as medical supply vendors. He was robbing the very institution I built to fund his midlife crisis. I picked up my secure phone and dialed a number I had memorized 6 months ago. It rang once before a deep voice answered. Sterling Investigations. It is time, I said, my voice steady and devoid of mercy. Grant just tried to expedite the divorce filing. He is currently at the hospital with the mistress. Are you sure you want to proceed with the full option? Mrs. Mercer, the detective asked. I am done being Mrs. Mercer, I replied, watching Grant on the screen as he nervously looked over his shoulder, terrified that I might reappear. Activate Project Phoenix. Burn it all down. I watched the live feed from the administrative wing as Grant burst into the office of Marcus Thorne, our chief financial officer and his longtime drinking buddy. Marcus looked up from his desk, startled by the intrusion, but Grant did not even bother to close the door properly before he started pacing the room like a trapped animal. She knows. Marcus, I swear she knows. Grant hissed, running his hands through his perfectly styled hair until it stood up in chaotic spikes. She saw the belly. She saw Tiffany. You should have seen the look in her eyes. It was not anger. It was dead, like a shark looking at a seal. Calm down, Grant, Marcus said, standing up and closing the blinds. Did she say anything? Did she scream? No, that is the problem, Grant yelled, slamming his fist onto the mahogany desk. She fixed my tie. She fixed my damn tie. And asked about my heart. We need to accelerate the transfer. The charity fund. The $10 million. Move it to the offshore account under Tiffany's name. Today, I sat in my office, sipping lukewarm tea, and saved the recording. Grant thought he was being clever, hiding assets before a divorce, but he was digging his own grave. I had installed a military-grade keystroke logger on his laptop 6 months ago, the day I found a receipt for a 4-carat diamond ring that never appeared on my finger. That piece of spyware had revealed far more than a sordid affair. It had uncovered treason against the very oath of medicine. Grant was not just stealing money. He was selling us out. I opened a subfolder on my screen titled Data Breach. For the past 3 months, Grant had been downloading encrypted patient records, thousands of them containing sensitive genetic data. He was negotiating to sell this information to a rival pharmaceutical conglomerate for a massive kickback. He was trading the privacy of cancer patients for a golden parachute. I picked up my phone and dialed Sarah, the most ruthless corporate attorney in the state. She answered on the first ring. I have the audio of him authorizing the embezzlement of $10 million, I said calmly. And I have the emails regarding the data sale. Good, Sarah replied, her voice sharp as a razor. That triggers the business ethics clause in the prenuptial agreement immediately. Section 4, paragraph 2. If his actions cause material damage to the reputation of Helios, he forfeits all executive authority and his equity vests back to the primary founder. That is you. Lydia. Do I file for divorce now? I asked, though I already knew the answer. No, Sarah advised. If we file now, He lawyers up and fights the data theft charges separately. We need him to implicate himself publicly. We need him to feel safe enough to make a fatal mistake. I hung up and switched my attention back to the surveillance feed. Grant was now on the phone with Tiffany, his voice dripping with desperate reassurance. "Baby, listen to me," Grant pleaded into the receiver. I know you are tired of hiding, but the divorce is complicated." I could hear Tiffany's shrill voice on the other end, amplified by the speakerphone he had foolishly left on. "I am done being a secret. Grant, you promised me." "The Helios 20th anniversary gala is this Saturday. I want to go. I want to walk the red carpet. If you do not take me, I am walking into that hospital and screaming your name until the press shows up." Grant rubbed his temples, looking at the ceiling. "Okay. Okay. Fine. I will take you. I have the board in my pocket. I will introduce you as a strategic partner. Lydia is sick anyway. She will not be there. We will make our debut. Just please. Stop yelling." I leaned back in my chair, a genuine smile finally breaking through my icy demeanor. He was going to bring her. He was actually arrogant enough to bring his pregnant mistress to the most high-profile medical event of the decade because he thought I was a fragile, broken woman cowering at home. Strategic partner, I whispered to the empty room. He had no idea. He was not just bringing a date, he was bringing the evidence. The gala would not be his coronation, it would be his execution, and I would be the one pulling the switch. The house was quiet, filled with the suffocating silence of a marriage that had been dead for years. I stood in our walk-in closet, steaming the wrinkles out of Grant's bespoke tuxedo, playing the role of the devoted wife one last time. I brushed imaginary lint from the black silk, my movements precise and gentle, while my mind was sharpening the knife I would plunge into his back tomorrow night. I had not mentioned the incident at the hospital since that day. I let him believe that my appearance there was just a fluke, a moment of confusion from a stressed woman. To seal the deal, I had planted the bait on the antique oak desk in his study, right where he would sit to drink his evening scotch. I left a folder. It was marked Confidential Neurological Evaluation, Lydia Mercer. Inside was a completely fabricated report detailing a diagnosis of early-onset cognitive decline, recommending immediate transfer of power of attorney to a spouse. I watched from the cracked door as Grant found it. He picked up the paper, his eyes scanning the medical jargon I had forged. A look of twisted relief washed over his face. He did not look sad that his wife was supposedly losing her mind. He looked liberated. He believed he had won the lottery. If I was mentally incompetent, he could take control of the company legally without a messy divorce battle. His arrogance, which had been shaken at the hospital, returned in full force. He walked into the bedroom where I was resting, the folder tucked under his arm. He sat on the edge of the bed, his voice dripping with a sickeningly sweet tone. "Lydia," he said, patting my hand, "I have been thinking about the gala tomorrow. Honestly, it is going to be a bore. Just a bunch of stuffy male investors smoking cigars and talking about stocks. You really should stay home and rest. You have looked so frail lately." I looked up at him, widening my eyes to feign innocence. "But Grant, it is the 20th anniversary. I thought we were going to celebrate together." "I know, honey," he sighed, shaking his head. "But I worry about you. The doctor said, well, stress is bad for you. Let me handle the sharks. You stay here, take a warm bath, and sleep. I will be home early." "Okay," I whispered, looking down at my hands. "If you think that is best." "I trust you, Grant." "I do think it is best," he replied, struggling to hide a smirk. He left the room to call Tiffany. As soon as the door clicked shut, I dropped the act. I grabbed my burner phone and sent a mass text to the private list of invitees I had curated the head of the Medical Ethics Board, the district attorney, and the 3 biggest donors to the hospital foundation. They were not coming to celebrate Grant. They were coming to witness a public execution. My personal phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was a transaction alert from the company credit card $75,000 at a high-end jeweler downtown. He was dressing his mistress in diamonds paid for by the hospital's charity fund. That afternoon, I met Dr. Reynolds, the head of obstetrics, in a quiet coffee shop 3 blocks away from the hospital. He was a good man, loyal to the oath, and he looked terrified as he handed me a sealed envelope. "Are you sure you want to use this?" "Lydia," he asked, his voice low. This is nuclear. Grant is about to sell the genetic data of 5,000 patients to a rival corporation." I stated flatly, "I need everything." I opened the envelope. The information inside regarding the conception, dates, and the biological markers of Tiffany's pregnancy was not just a surprise. It was a biological impossibility for Grant. It was the final nail in the coffin. Back at the house, Grant was in his study with his lawyer, finalizing the contracts for the data sale. They planned to sign the deal immediately following the gala, assuming I would be asleep and powerless. That night, I lay in bed, feigning sleep, my breathing shallow and even. I felt the mattress dip as Grant sat down beside me. He watched me for a long time. "I am sorry, Lydia," he whispered into the dark, his voice devoid of actual remorse. "But you are just in the way now. Tomorrow, it is all over." He was right. It was all over, but not in the way he thought. He closed his eyes, dreaming of millions, while I lay awake, counting down the hours until the spotlight turned on. The grand ballroom of the Royal Sovereign Hotel was a cathedral of glass and gold, suffocating under the scent of expensive lilies and desperation. It was the 20th anniversary of Helios, and the air was thick with the electricity of 500 socialites pretending to like each other. I watched from the shadows of the mezzanine as Grant made his entrance. He looked like a man who believed he had conquered the world. He wore the tuxedo I had steamed for him, a black silk armor of deceit, and on his arm was Tiffany. She was draped in a custom-made silver gown designed to conceal her condition, but the 7-month swell of her stomach was undeniable to anyone with eyes. She walked with her chin high, the diamonds around her neck catching the light diamonds that I knew had been purchased with funds meant for pediatric cancer research. As they moved through the crowd, a ripple of whispers followed them like the wake of a ship. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. The wives of the investors covered their mouths with gloved hands. Grant ignored them all. He was high on his own delusion, convinced that by tomorrow morning, with my medical incapacity papers filed, he would be the sole emperor of this kingdom. He guided Tiffany to the front table, the seat of honor that should have been mine, and kissed her cheek for the cameras. At 8 o'clock, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage, and Grant strode up to the podium. He adjusted the microphone, flashing that charismatic, empty smile that had fooled me 15 years ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," Grant's voice boomed, smooth and confident. "Tonight, we celebrate 2 decades of excellence. But Helios is more than a hospital. It is a family. And like any family, we are built on the pillars of trust, integrity, and sacrifice. I stand here tonight." He paused for dramatic effect, placing a hand over his heart. It was nauseating. "I stand here thanks to the unwavering support of my partners. We are expanding. We are innovating. And we are entering a new era of transparency." The irony was so thick it nearly choked me. As he opened his mouth to continue his soliloquy on morality, the stage lights suddenly died. The room gasped. The massive LED screen behind him, which was supposed to play a montage of his achievements, flickered to life with a harsh static noise. Grant laughed nervously into the dark. "A little technical difficulty. Folks, even technology gets nervous around greatness. Right. But the video that appeared was not his sizzle reel. A giant, imposing crest appeared on the screen, a double-headed eagle holding a serpent. The room fell into a dead silence. It was the seal of the Rostova Trust, my maiden name, and the legal entity that actually owned the majority voting shares of the hospital. Grant stared at the screen, his mouth slightly open. He had never seen that seal before. He thought the money came from generic venture capital. He never knew he had been working for my family's estate the entire time. The heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom groaned open. A collective gasp swept through the room as heads turned. I stepped into the light. I was not the frail, sickly wife in a bathrobe he had left at home. I was wearing a blood-red evening gown that clung to my body like armor. My hair swept back. My lips painted a shade of crimson that matched the dress. I did not walk alone. Flanking me were 6 grim-faced individuals, 4 federal agents with badges clearly visible on their belts, and 2 senior auditors from the National Medical Board. I walked down the center aisle, the crowd parting for me like the Red Sea. The sound of my heels on the marble floor was the only noise in the cavernous room. Grant froze. He looked like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. He gripped the podium so hard his knuckles turned white. Tiffany, realizing the shift in atmospheric pressure, took a stumbling step backward, knocking over a crystal water glass that shattered loudly. I ascended the stairs to the stage, my eyes locked on his. He was trembling now, sweat beading on his forehead despite the air conditioning. "Lydia," Grant wheezed into the microphone, the sound amplifying his terror to the entire room. You are supposed to be in bed. What is happening?" I did not answer him. I stepped into his personal space, the scent of my perfume overpowering his fear. I reached out and gently, almost lovingly, pried the microphone from his shaking fingers. He was too weak to resist. I turned to the audience, to the cameras, and to the world. "My husband spoke about transparency," I said, my voice steady and cold as steel. "I think that is a wonderful idea. Grant promised you a look at the numbers. So, ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the screen. It is time to announce the real financial report." I clicked the remote in my hand, and the giant screen behind me shifted from the Rostova seal to a series of high-definition documents. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the room as a bill of sale for a $3 million villa in Cabo San Lucas appeared, followed by an invoice for a 70-foot yacht named the Tiffany. "You told the board that the budget for the pediatric cancer wing was tight," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the stunned silence. "You told the parents of sick children that we could not afford the new radiation machines, but looking at these bank transfers, it seems the money was there all along. It was just redirected to the Grant and Tiffany Lifestyle Fund." The room erupted. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated fury. The investors, who minutes ago had been clapping for Grant, were now standing up, shouting and pointing fingers. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. "This is a lie," Grant screamed, his face turning a blotchy purple as he tried to grab the microphone back, but I held it firmly out of his reach. This is just a clerical error. It is a misunderstanding of the asset allocation. I can explain everything." "Can you?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Perhaps you can explain this recording from the last board meeting." I tapped a key on the laptop connected to the podium. Grant's voice, clear and arrogant, boomed through the speakers. "Those idiots on the board would not know a balance sheet from a menu. I could drain the accounts dry and they would thank me for it. They are sheep. Marcus, just sheep waiting to be sheared." The booing intensified, turning into a roar of hostility. Grant's personal attorney, a man named Miller who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else, jumped up from his table. "I object to this," Miller shouted, trying to rush the stage. "This is defamation. We are leaving." But before he could take 3 steps, Sarah stepped into his path. She held up a blue folder with the calmness of an executioner. "Sit down, Miller," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. "This is a federal court order freezing all assets belonging to Grant Mercer and his known associates. If you try to leave with him, you will be charged with aiding and abetting a fugitive." Miller froze, looked at Grant, and then slowly sat back down, effectively abandoning his client. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Tiffany, realizing the ship was sinking fast, was trying to slip away toward the service exit, clutching her diamond necklace as if it were a life preserver. "Going somewhere. Tiffany." I asked into the microphone. Every head in the room swiveled to look at her. She froze like a statue, her hand on the doorknob. "Or should I call you by your real name?" I continued, signaling the tech team to change the slide. "Ladies and gentlemen, meet Brenda Miller. She is not a model. She is a professional con artist with outstanding warrants for marriage fraud in Nevada and Ohio." A mugshot of Tiffany or Brenda appeared on the screen. She looked younger, harder, and less polished, but it was undeniably her. Grant spun around to look at his mistress, his eyes wide with betrayal. "What, Brenda, you? You told me you were a runway model in Milan." Tiffany's face crumbled. She dropped the act of the sophisticated partner and dissolved into hysterical, fake tears. "He made me do it," she wailed, pointing a shaking finger at Grant. "I did not know anything. He said he was divorced. He seduced me. I am just a victim here." "A victim who spent $50,000 on shoes last week using a stolen corporate card," I countered dryly. Grant looked from Tiffany to me, his world disintegrating. But I was not done. I had one final blow to deliver. "The embezzlement is bad, Grant," I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming deadly serious. "But stealing money is one thing. Selling the genetic blueprints of 5,000 patients to a foreign competitor, that is treason against this profession." I pointed to the side of the stage. The federal agents, who had been waiting in the shadows, stepped into the light. They were not smiling. They moved toward the stage with handcuffs already drawn. Grant looked at the agents, then back at the angry crowd, and finally at me. He realized there was no lawyer, no mistress, and no money to save him. He was completely alone. He lunged toward me, grabbing the hem of my red dress, his eyes wild with panic. Lydia, please," he begged, tears streaming down his face, mixing with the sweat. "We have been together for 15 years. 15 years. Lydia, do not let them take me. I am your husband. Doesn't that mean anything to you? Please, for the sake of our love." I looked down at him with the same pity one might feel for a dying cockroach. "That bond died," I whispered, loud enough for the microphone to catch every syllable. "The moment you pulled the plug on my heart research project to buy designer handbags for that fraud over there." Grant was on his knees, not in prayer, but in a desperate attempt to shield himself from the federal agents closing in on him. He looked like a cornered rat, eyes darting around the room until they landed on Tiffany's protruding stomach. He scrambled toward her, grabbing her waist with frantic possession. "You cannot take me away," Grant screamed, his voice cracking with hysteria. "I have a child on the way. My son, the heir to Helios. You cannot leave a pregnant woman and her child without a father. Everything I did it for him. I did it for my legacy." He looked out at the crowd, pleading with the investors who were filming the scene on their phones. "Look at her. She is carrying the future of this company. The family trust has to provide for them. It is the law." The ballroom went silent for a moment. His plea seemed to work. A few people looked at Tiffany with pity. The sanctity of an unborn child was a powerful shield, and Grant knew exactly how to wield it. I let the silence hang for 5 seconds. Then I started to laugh, It was not a joyful sound. It was a low, clinical chuckle, the kind a coroner might make when the cause of death is painfully obvious. The sound echoed off the high ceilings, sending a visible shiver through the front row. "An heir?" I asked, wiping a tear of mirth from my eye. "Oh, Grant, you really should have paid more attention to your own medical history." I gestured to the wings of the stage. "Dr. Reynolds, if you please." Dr. Reynolds, the chief of surgery and a man whose integrity was unimpeachable, stepped up to the microphone. He held a single blue file in his hand. He adjusted his glasses and looked down at Grant with professional disdain. "I have here a medical record from the St. Jude Private Clinic in Nevada," Dr. Reynolds announced, his voice dry and factual. "Dated August 12th, 5 years ago. Patient name Grant Mercer. Procedure bilateral vasectomy." Grant froze. His jaw went slack. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. He had forgotten. In his arrogance, or perhaps in the blur of his hedonistic lifestyle, he had buried this secret deep. He had undergone the procedure secretly to ensure that none of his one-night stands could ever trap him with a paternity suit. He thought he was protecting his fortune. The procedure was successful. Dr. Reynolds continued, reading from the paper. "Post-operative sperm count analysis confirmed azoospermia. 0 count. Mr. Mercer has been clinically sterile for half a decade." I stepped forward, looking down at my husband. "Did you hear that? Grant, unless you have achieved a biological miracle that defies the laws of physiology, that baby cannot possibly be yours." The realization hit him like a physical blow. He slowly turned his head toward Tiffany. She was no longer crying. Her face had gone chalk white. The trap she had built alongside him had just snapped shut on her own leg. "Grant," Tiffany stammered, backing away, her hands protective over her belly. "I can explain. Medical mistakes happen." "Maybe it reversed itself." "Reversed itself," Grant whispered, his voice trembling with a new kind of rage. "Reversed itself." He stood up, ignoring the agents, ignoring me, ignoring the cameras. He lunged at Tiffany with a primal roar. "Who is it?" he screamed, grabbing her by the shoulders and shaking her. "Whose bastard is in there? I bought you a house. I bought you a car. I destroyed my life for you." "Who is it? Get off me!" Tiffany shrieked, shoving him away with surprising strength. The facade of the innocent victim evaporated instantly. Her face twisted into a snarl. "It is Chad's okay. It is the personal trainer's. Are you happy now?" The crowd gasped audibly. The soap opera playing out before them was better than anything on television. Chad Grant looked like he had been shot. The guy who comes to the pool house. "At least he is a real man," Tiffany yelled, throwing all caution to the wind now that her meal ticket was canceled. "You are just a pathetic old wallet. I needed someone to pay for the kid, and you were dumb enough to believe you could still perform. You are a joke, Grant. Everyone laughs at you." Grant staggered back, devastated. The image he had cultivated, the virile, powerful patriarch, the genius CEO, the family man, was shattered into a million pieces. He was not a father. He was not a leader. He was just a sterile, cuckolded thief who had been played by a woman half his age. He looked at me, his eyes hollow and pleading, searching for some anchor in the storm he had created. "Lydia." He croaked. "Do not look at me," I said, turning my back on him to address the crowd. "I am just the sterile wife you tried to replace. It seems ironically that we had that in common after all." "Effective immediately," I announced into the microphone, my voice cutting through the murmurs of the crowd like a gavel strike. "I am activating Section 19 of the Helios Corporate Charter. Grant Mercer is hereby terminated from his position as CEO for gross ethical violations and criminal misconduct." The lead federal agent, a tall man with a face like carved granite, stepped forward. He did not ask Grant to come quietly. He grabbed Grant's shoulder with a grip that left no room for negotiation. "Grant Mercer," the agent stated, his voice devoid of emotion. You are under arrest for 18 counts of wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy to traffic protected health information. You have the right to remain silent." Grant tried to pull away, but the second agent was already there. The sound of the handcuffs ratcheting shut was sharp and metallic, a jarring contrast to the soft classical music that had been playing just an hour ago. Those hands, which had signed checks worth millions and swirled expensive cognac, were now locked together in cold, unforgiving steel. I stepped closer, looking down at him. "Furthermore," I continued, addressing the room but keeping my eyes fixed on my husband, "the board has authorized the immediate clawback of all unvested stock options and the seizure of your personal equity to pay restitution to the hospital. You are leaving this building with exactly what you brought into this marriage. Nothing." Tiffany, who had been trying to inch away towards the exit again, let out a shriek as a female officer blocked her path. "Ms. Miller," the officer said, "we have a warrant for your arrest as well. Accessory to money laundering and possession of stolen property." "No!" Tiffany screamed, flailing as the cuffs went on. "I am pregnant. You cannot arrest me. I need a doctor." "We have doctors in holding," the officer replied impassively, marching her towards the side exit. Grant watched her go, then turned his desperate gaze back to me. The reality of his situation was finally sinking in. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the terrified desperation of a man watching the walls close in. "Lydia!" "Please!" he wailed, struggling against the agent's grip. "I can fix this. I will pay it back. Just tell them to stop. We can start over. I will be the husband you wanted, I promise." I looked at him, searching for even a flicker of the man I had once loved. I found nothing. Just a stranger in a tuxedo he could no longer afford. "Start over," I repeated, my voice flat. "Grant, look outside." I pointed towards the floor-to-ceiling glass doors at the entrance of the ballroom. Through the glass, the flashing red and blue lights of half a dozen police cruisers washed over the terrified faces of the guests. "That is your future," I said. "There is no starting over. There is only the end." Grant looked around the room, seeking a friendly face, someone who might intervene. But the investors, the partners, the friends who had laughed at his jokes and drunk his champagne, all turned their backs. They looked at him with disgust, shifting their bodies to distance themselves from the contamination of his failure. He was a leper in a room full of germaphobes. Sarah stepped onto the stage, holding a single sheet of paper and a pen. She walked up to Grant, who was breathing in short, shallow gasps. "The divorce decree," Sarah said, holding the paper against a clipboard. "It is an uncontested waiver. You acknowledge that your infidelity and criminal actions void the prenup. You get nothing. Sign it." I need a lawyer," Grant stammered, his eyes darting wildly. "I cannot sign this without—" "Your assets are frozen." "Grant," Sarah said coldly, "you cannot afford a lawyer. If you want the court to even consider assigning you a public defender without me burying you under a mountain of additional civil suits that will follow you to prison, you will sign this now." One of the agents loosened Grant's right hand just enough for him to hold the pen. His hand was shaking so violently he could barely hold it. He looked at me one last time, begging for mercy with wet, red-rimmed eyes. I just stared back, unblinking, defeated. Grant pressed the pen to the paper. He scrawled his name, the signature jagged and weak. With that ink, he signed away his marriage, his fortune, and the last shred of his dignity. Sarah snatched the paper back instantly. "Take him away," I said, as they dragged him out, weeping and stumbling. I felt the heavy weight on my chest finally begin to lift. The parasite had been removed. It had been exactly 7 days since the flashing lights of the police cruisers painted the ballroom walls in chaotic strokes of red and blue. I stood in the center of the corner office that had belonged to Grant, but the ghost of his presence had already been exorcised. The pretentious velvet paintings were gone, replaced by clean, modern art. The humidor on the desk was in the trash. The air no longer smelled of his cloying cologne. It smelled of lemon polish and fresh starts. I picked up the phone and dialed maintenance. "Please ensure the signage on the front of the building is removed by this afternoon," I instructed calmly. "The Mercer name is to be scrubbed from every ID badge, every letterhead, and every wall. We are returning to the original charter name, Rostova Medical Center." When I walked through the corridors later that morning, the atmosphere had shifted for years. The staff had walked on eggshells, terrified of Grant's unpredictable temper and arbitrary firing policies. Now, doctors stopped to shake my hand. Nurses smiled with genuine warmth. They did not respect me because I held the title of CEO. They respected me because they knew I was the one who had actually written the protocols that saved lives while Grant was out playing golf. But there was one final loose end to tie up. That afternoon, I sat in a cold, sterile visitation room at the county detention center. The fluorescent lights buzzed with an annoying hum that seemed to drill into my skull. When the guard brought Grant in, I barely recognized him. In just 1 week, he had aged 10 years. His skin was sallow, his hair was unwashed and thinning, and the bright orange jumpsuit hung loosely on his frame. The confident, swaggering man who had commanded the gala stage was dead. He sat down opposite me, separated by a thick pane of scratched glass. He picked up the receiver with trembling hands. "Lydia," he rasped, his voice sounding like sandpaper. I did not think you would come." I picked up my receiver but kept my expression blank. I slid a document against the glass for him to see. "The district attorney is pushing for the maximum sentence," I said, my tone as conversational as if we were discussing the weather. "Racketeering, embezzlement, wire fraud. They are offering a plea deal of 20 years without parole. If you go to trial, you will likely get 30. Grant stared at the paper, tears welling in his eyes. He looked up at me, his face twisting in anguish. Why are you being so cruel?" he asked, his voice cracking. "I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, but to destroy me like this, to take everything, we were family. Lydia, how can you be so cold?" I leaned forward, my breath fogging the glass slightly. "I am not being cruel, Grant," I replied softly. "I am simply being efficient. You planted seeds of deceit for 15 years. You are just harvesting the crop now." He shook his head, sobbing. "It was just money. It was just sex. I never wanted to hurt you personally." "Do not lie to me." I cut him off, my voice turning hard. "I found the recordings on your cloud drive, the ones from 3 years ago, the conversations you had with our adopted daughter, Maya." Grant froze. The color drained from his face completely. "I heard you," I continued, my voice trembling with suppressed rage for the first time. "I heard you telling that innocent little girl that her mother was too busy to love her. You tried to poison her mind against me so that when you eventually left, she would choose you." "You tried to weaponize a child's love to secure your alimony checks? That was the drop that made the cup overflow. Grant, that was when I decided you did not deserve a divorce. You deserved oblivion." Grant opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He knew there was no defense for that. He hung his head, defeated, his shoulders slumping under the weight of his own malice. I hung up the receiver and stood up. I did not look back as the guard pulled him away. Stepping out of the prison and into the bright afternoon sunlight felt like waking up from a long, suffocating nightmare. The air tasted sweeter. My chest felt lighter, as if a malignant tumor had been surgically removed. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a text message from an unknown number. "Lydia, please. It is Tiffany. I have no money for a lawyer. I am sleeping on a cot in a holding cell. The baby. Please, you have to help us. Grant ruined me too." I looked at the screen for a moment, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, just indifference. I tapped the screen twice. Block contact. Delete conversation. I put the phone away and walked toward my car, ready to rewrite the rest of my life. The trial was mercifully short, with the mountains of financial records and the damning testimony regarding the data breach I had provided to the prosecution. There was no room for legal maneuvering. Grant sat in the defendant's chair, a hollow shell of the man he used to be, as the judge delivered the verdict with a strike of the gavel that echoed like a thunderclap. He was sentenced to 25 years in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole for at least 15. The court also ordered the complete forfeiture of his assets to pay restitution to the hospital. He looked back at me one last time as the bailiffs led him away, but I felt nothing. The anger had burned itself out, leaving only a clean, quiet peace. Tiffany did not fare much better. Word reached me through the grapevine that she gave birth to a baby boy in the prison infirmary. Since the biological father refused to acknowledge paternity and she was facing a 5-year sentence for fraud and conspiracy, the child was immediately placed into the state foster care system. It was a tragedy for the innocent child, but it was a cycle of chaos that I had finally removed myself from. 12 months later, the atmosphere in the Grand Hall of the Medical Association was electric. I stood on the podium, holding the heavy crystal trophy for the Lifetime Medical Achievement Award. The applause was deafening, washing over me not as validation, but as a celebration of resilience. "Thank you," I said into the microphone, my voice steady and strong. "Today, I am not just accepting an award, I am reclaiming a legacy. To honor that, I am announcing the immediate establishment of the Arthur Rostova Scholarship Fund. We are endowing $5 million to support underprivileged medical students who have the talent but lack the means. This is for my father, who taught me that medicine is about healing, not profit." As I stepped down from the stage, the crowd parted. I saw them, the fair-weather friends, the board members who had once sided with Grant, the socialites who had snubbed me. They rushed forward, teeth bared in fake smiles, extending their hands and offering congratulations. "Lydia, darling, we always knew you were the genius behind it all," one woman exclaimed, reaching for my arm. I did not stop. I did not even slow down. I walked right past them as if they were ghosts. Their validation meant nothing to me anymore. Near the exit, a man was waiting. It was Julian, a brilliant neurologist who had been a quiet, steady presence at the hospital for a decade. He had never sucked up to Grant. He had just done his job and saved lives. "You were incredible up there, Lydia," Julian said, offering a genuine smile that made his eyes crinkle at the corners. "Are you hungry? I know a place that serves terrible burgers but excellent fries." "I would love that," I replied, feeling a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with revenge. "But I am driving." I walked out into the cool evening air. The valet pulled up, but he was not driving the ostentatious sports car Grant had bought to show off. He was driving a vintage convertible, a car I had bought with my own money, signed with my own name, and paid for with my own hard work. I slid into the driver's seat and gripped the leather steering wheel. I glanced at the rearview mirror one last time. The image of the woman I used to be scared, silenced, and shadowed was gone. The road ahead was open and wide. The story ends the next morning at the hospital. I stood in the sunlight, wearing a hard hat, surrounded by architects. I took the pen and signed the final authorization for the construction of the new pediatric cardiology wing. Beneath my signature, I added a handwritten dedication that would be etched into the cornerstone of the building. It read, "Truth is the only medicine that heals all wounds." Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please leave a comment below, sharing your location, and let's chat about what you thought of Lydia's revenge. If you enjoyed this story, please do not forget to subscribe to the channel Lily Revenge Stories, hit the like button, and smash that hype button to help this video get recommended to more people. See you in the next drama.